All right, these clamps will hold it in place until the glue sets up. Next thing I want to do is square up my top. And I suppose I could use my T-square, which usually goes in like this, and it works pretty well. But with a wide board, I end up starting with the square way off the edge of the table, and it's not very steady. So I'm going to use something else, something called a panel cutter. This is a homemade one. It's just a piece of plywood with a cleat screwed on it. And on the bottom, there's a piece of hardwood which rides in the same groove as the little T-square does. In fact, this is just a big square. And now I'll just square up one edge of my top. And I want to cut it to 16 7/8 inches. Now, in order to attach the breadboard edge, I need to make a tongue on the top, and then our edge will slip onto that. And I've set up the saw 3/4 of an inch away from the fence and about 1/4 of an inch deep. In order to remove the rest of the material to make the tongue, I have to make a couple adjustments. I'm going to raise the blade, and using the previous cut as a guide so that it's just even with that cut, like that. And then I do have to readjust the fence so that it's at 1/2 inch between the fence and the blade. And now I'm ready to complete the tongue. You notice that I've removed a little bit of the tongue on each corner. And that's so that when the breadboard edge is attached, I won't see that sticking through. And when I make the edge, there's some wood remaining. To make this groove, I use the router table. Except this time, I've installed a 1/4 inch grooving bit and another piece of tape to mark the beginning and end of the cutting edge. And on each piece, I'll put a pencil mark as a guide, so that I'll end up with this much wood remaining. Now, the depth of this cut is about 3/4 of an inch. And I'm going to cut that in 2 passes, about 3/8 of an inch at a time. And that's because this is a small router bit, and trying to make a deep plunge cut in one shot is hard on the router and on the bit. Take a look. A little bit of yellow carpenter's glue. Just spread it out evenly with a little brush here. I'm ready to slip the edge right on. Set it in my clamps. Now for the drawer. It's made out of 1/2 inch pine with a 1/4 inch plywood bottom. And the sides and the front have been grooved to accept the 1/4 inch bottom. The back is fit into a dado joint, and the front has a rabbet joint. First one I want to do is that rabbet joint, and I've set up the table saw with a dado head cutter, which is just 2 blades that are set at an angle to one another, and it plows out material. Again, using a gauge block and my T-square, I'll run each end of that front through. Okay, that'll fit together nicely. Now I'll have to make some saw adjustments so I can cut the dado in the side pieces to accept the back. Okay, a little more yellow carpenter's glue, and I can start to put this together. Now, the glue is only at the joints. You want to leave this piece of 1/4-inch plywood which goes in the bottom floating so that it can expand and contract freely with changes in moisture. We don't want it to expand so much that it can, if it was glued to the sides, it might break it open when it's swelled up. I guess I will admit that this is a pretty lightweight drawer, but it isn't that big, and how much can you really put in it? Now the corners will get nailed together with some 1-inch brads. Well, now I need a way to hold the top to the base. And what I did is made these little cleats right here. And they fit in like this. And these screws will fasten it to the rails. And then I've got some additional screws right here which will hold the top down. Well, the belt sander does a great job with the initial sanding, but there's nothing like a palm sander to finish it off. Well, that looks pretty good. I can take the top and flip it over so that the bottom side is facing up, and just take the whole leg assembly, the base of the table, set it on the top, and fasten it in place with 4 drywall screws. Okay, now I need something to hold my drawer in place. So I've made some cleats. They're just pieces of 1x2 that are screwed together so that you get an angle, and those will get fastened right here to the side rails. But I want to make sure I keep this just slightly above our front rail so the drawer will ride on this rather than on the rail. Well, I guess it wouldn't be a drawer without a knob to pull it open. A little bit more fine sanding on this piece and it'll be ready for some finishing. Well, it sure is nice having this designated area to do all my finishing. You know, we've tried to do it in the shop, and it's just impossible. There's too much dust in there. It settles around. You can't get rid of it. Out here, at least I have a relatively dust-free environment. Now, in this project, I'm starting with what's called a sanding sealer, and I'm applying it to the areas of the table that you're really not going to see, just to protect the wood so it won't absorb moisture and start to warp and twist. I'll also do that to the inside and bottom side of my drawer, and then I'll get working on the side that we're going to see. Well, the next step is to apply a pre-stain sealer. And it's absorbed by the softer wood a little more than the hard, so I'll end up being able to control the depth of my stain. Let me show you on a piece that I've done for a sample. The stain I want to use was applied to raw wood, and you can see it's very uneven and blotchy. And then over here, over the pre-stained sealer. And by rubbing it at different degrees, I ended up with this little area right here, which is what I want to use on my table. So I apply the sealer lightly, let it sit according to the directions for 5 to 10 minutes, and then wipe it off. Okay, that's all wiped off. And the instructions say that I should wait at least an hour before I put some stain on. Well, this stain should give me a country pine look. I'll put it on with the brush and then let it sit and wipe it down a bit. Well, I would say that that's about the look that I want. Now, with the stain sufficiently dried, I'm ready for the first coat, which is a sanding sealer. Well, after the sanding sealer dried, I sanded it with a very fine sandpaper, and I like to use a 320 grit wet dry sandpaper. What happens, though, is you get a little bit of residue left over. That's supposed to happen. But before you put the finish on, you have to clean it off. And I like to use a tack cloth, which is really just cheesecloth that's treated with material to make it sticky. Once all that residue has been removed, I'm ready to put on my first coat of finish, which in this case is going to be a satin finish polyurethane. And that'll give me a nice, durable surface. Well, here's a piece of friendly advice. When you get ready to build one of these, you better build two, because everybody's going to want one of these.